Welcome in, everyone. Ready for another deep dive.
Always.
Today we're diving into a story you might think you know. But trust me, we're about to add some fascinating layers. We're exploring the Urantia book's unique take on Adam and Eve. Now don't worry, this isn't about preaching any particular belief system. We're here to explore the ideas presented in this text, the cosmic drama, the unexpected twists, and see what insights we can glean about humanity's journey.
That's right. This isn't your average Sunday school story. The Urantia book presents a complex cosmology, and within that, the story of Adam and Eve becomes a pivotal event with far-reaching consequences.
So let's start by setting the scene. The Urantia book refers to Earth as Urantia, and it paints a picture that's a far cry from the idyllic garden we often imagine. Think of a world grappling with its own growing pains, conflicts erupting, languages scattered, and a distinct lack of moral and intellectual development. It's not exactly paradise, is it?
It's crucial to grasp this context because it dramatically shapes the challenges Adam and Eve face. They weren't just asked to tend a garden. They were tasked with uplifting an entire planet, grappling with some serious pre-existing issues.
They were basically handed a fixer-upper of a planet and told, go make it work.
Exactly. The sheer scale of their mission, the weight of responsibility, it's palpable throughout the Urantia book's narrative. And what makes it even more daunting is their isolation.
Right, because they weren't exactly able to phone a friend for advice, were they?
Not at all. The Urantia book emphasizes that Adam and Eve were cut off from easy communication with their celestial superiors. Imagine the pressure they must have felt, tasked with guiding an entire planet toward a brighter future with minimal outside support.
It really makes you appreciate the sheer audacity of their mission, doesn't it? To be entrusted with such a monumental task and yet be relatively cut off from direct guidance. It speaks to a certain level of trust from their superiors, but also a huge leap of faith on their part.
Absolutely. And it's within this context of isolation and immense responsibility that the character of Caligastia enters the picture, adding another layer of complexity to their story.
Okay, let's talk about Caligastia. He's painted as quite the antagonist in this story, isn't he?
That's right. The Urantia book describes him as a fallen prince, a being who had previously rebelled against the divine order and was now lurking around Adam and Eve, attempting to thwart their mission. Now, what's interesting here is that he couldn't directly control them.
So he couldn't just force them to make the wrong choices?
Precisely. Caligastia's power lay in manipulation, in subtly planting seeds of doubt and suggesting alternative paths. He couldn't make them stumble, but he could certainly make the path a lot more treacherous.
It makes you think about the whole concept of free will, doesn't it? Even within a divinely guided plan, there's this element of choice of personal agency that Caligastia seems to exploit.
That's a really insightful observation. The Urantia book doesn't shy away from these complex theological questions. It suggests that true growth, true progress requires the possibility of choosing differently, even if those choices lead to missteps.
So it's not about being puppets on a string, blindly following a predetermined path. There's genuine risk involved both for Adam and Eve and for humanity as a whole.
Precisely. And this is where the story takes an interesting turn. We're all familiar with the concept of the fall, but the Urantia book presents Eve's actions not so much as a transgression against a specific rule, but as a deviation from the divinely ordained plan.
Okay, so less about a forbidden fruit and more about a divergence from a designated path.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that the text suggests Eve wasn't motivated by malice or disobedience in the traditional sense. She genuinely believed she was acting in the best interests of humanity, seeking to accelerate their progress.
So where does that leave Adam in all of this?
Adam is fully aware of the situation of Eve's choice and its implications, and his response is a powerful testament to the depth of their connection.
He chooses to stand by her even knowing the consequences.
Yes. The Urantia book portrays it as an act of love so profound that it transcends any fear of punishment. Adam chooses solidarity with Eve, accepting the impending consequences as part of their shared destiny.
That's a pretty intense level of commitment. It makes you wonder how that choice, that act of love and solidarity ripples through their story.
It's a pivotal moment, no doubt. And the text doesn't shy away from the very human emotions involved. The Urantia book describes Adam wandering for 30 days filled with grief and uncertainty, mirroring the emotional turmoil Eve experiences.
So even though they were these advanced beings entrusted with this incredible mission, they were still capable of experiencing such profound sadness, such deep emotional pain. It makes them seem much more relatable, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that this entire narrative unfolds within a universe that the Urantia book describes as not mechanically perfect, but rather a universe shaped by personality and choice.
So their very nature, their capacity for love, grief, and choice is woven into the fabric of this universe. It's not seen as a flaw, but as an essential aspect of their being.
Precisely. And it's within this context, this universe that values individual experience, that we need to understand the Urantia book's unique definitions of good, sin, and evil.
Okay, let's unpack those definitions, because I have a feeling they might not be what people typically expect.
You're right about that. In the Urantia book, good is aligned with adhering to the divine plan, moving in harmony with the intended cosmic flow.
Makes sense so far. So where does sin come in?
Sin is a knowing departure from that plan, a conscious choice to deviate from the designated path. However, and this is where it gets nuanced, evil isn't necessarily about ill intentions. It arises from actions, even well-intentioned ones, that create disharmony and disrupt the intended order.
So Eve, in her desire to accelerate humanity's progress, might have been acting from a place of good intentions, but her actions inadvertently introduced an element of evil into the equation by straying from the divine plan. It's not about judging her heart, but rather about understanding the consequences of those choices within this larger cosmic framework.
Exactly. And those consequences, as described in the Urantia book, were significant and immediate.
This wasn't just a personal transgression, it had a ripple effect.
Absolutely. The Urantia book describes a violent conflict erupting as a direct result of their actions, a conflict that had far-reaching consequences for humanity's journey.
So it's less about Adam and Eve being punished for a single act, and more about their choices setting in motion a chain of events that altered the course of human history. It speaks to the interconnectedness of everything, how even seemingly personal choices can have these broader, unintended consequences. It paints a very different picture of their story, doesn't it? It's less about a singular act of disobedience and more about the complexities of free will, unintended consequences, and the very nature of progress itself.
Exactly. And speaking of consequences, we can't forget about the judgment that follows. The Urantia book details the arrival of celestial beings who deliver a weighty verdict. Adam and Eve are stripped of their immortality, becoming mortal beings, subject to age decay and ultimately death.
So it's like a cosmic demotion, a stripping away of their elevated status. But does the Urantia book frame this as them being branded as inherently evil?
That's where it gets nuanced. The Urantia book emphasizes that while Adam and Eve face repercussions for their actions, they aren't condemned as eternally damned or inherently wicked. The text underscores that they simply failed to adhere to the preordained path, a path designed to foster specific evolutionary advancements.
So it's less about them being punished for being bad and more about them facing the natural consequences of veering off course.
Precisely, their actions set in motion a chain reaction, introducing challenges that weren't part of the original plan.
Yeah.
It's crucial to understand that the Urantia book distinguishes this event from the traditional concept of the fall of man.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, the text argues that Adam and Eve's actions resulted in a degradation, a setback, if you will, that primarily affected them. It wasn't a complete derailment of humanity's spiritual evolution, as some interpretations suggest.
So more of a localized setback rather than a complete fall from grace for all of humanity.
Yes, and the Urantia book goes even further, suggesting that their actions, while deviating from the intended path, had both positive and negative consequences for humanity's development. It's a mixed legacy, a complex tapestry woven from the threads of choice, consequence, and the ever-evolving journey of a species finding its way.
A poignant reminder that progress isn't always linear, isn't it? That even missteps can contribute to the richness and complexity of the human experience.
Absolutely. Their story, as presented in the Urantia book, encourages us to reconsider our assumptions about perfection, free will, and the very nature of progress. It suggests that true growth often emerges from navigating challenges both expected and unforeseen.
It makes you wonder, what are the key takeaways from this unique interpretation of such a familiar story? What can we, the everyday humans grappling with our own choices and consequences, glean from all of this?
One of the most resonant messages within the Urantia book, and particularly relevant to this narrative, is the importance of patience. The text emphasizes trusting in a larger plan, even when progress seems slow or imperceptible. It's a call to embrace the long game, to resist the temptation to force outcomes or take shortcuts that might lead us astray from a greater purpose.
It's interesting, isn't it, that Adam and Eve's story, often seen as a cautionary tale about disobedience, can also be interpreted as a powerful message about the importance of patience, resilience, and trusting the unfolding of a larger plan.
Exactly. And Perhaps, just as importantly, it encourages us to embrace the imperfections inherent in our journey. There's a beautiful passage in the Urantia book that speaks to this idea. We are a part of a gigantic creation, and it is not strange that everything does not work in perfection. Our universe was not created in perfection. Perfection is our eternal goal, not our origin. What a glorious universe in that it is personal and progressive, not merely mechanical or even passively perfect.
That's a truly awe-inspiring thought, that we exist in a universe that values individuality, growth, and the messy beauty of progress over passive perfection. It's a powerful reminder that missteps, while challenging, are also opportunities for learning and course correction as we continue on this remarkable journey of existence. Thanks for diving deep with us today. It's clear that the Urantia book's perspective on the story of Adam and Eve offers a fresh, nuanced, and thought-provoking lens through which we can contemplate our own place in this grand, ever-unfolding universe.